Lonesome report, special report, I guess. Shad called me this morning and said he was worried because all of this stuff coming out about Ag Secretary is just coming out fast and furious, and we feel like I'm thinking in my head just now, like maybe I should have got on Twitter before I did this because who the heck knows what's going on or who's being talked about now. But I feel like it's important because the fight's beginning, I guess, and that's what I had said before the election to some people. Like, if Trump wins, that's just the beginning of the fight, really, for getting the independent farmers and ranchers' voice out there. Because last time he had the wrong people in his ear, and I guess as small as our reach is, we want to use it to get the right people in his ear as quickly as we can, I guess. And so this is Friday morning. Usually we record on Wednesdays, but we'll just put this out there. I'm not sure where it'll be. It might not be on Spotify, might not be the podcast way. I think the easiest and largest reach is YouTube for me, so it'll for sure be there. Um, and so I told Chad, we just go through the timeline a little bit. When we did last week's report, we got done, and I got on Twitter and saw that Joel Salatin had written a blog post, and Joel Salatin is a regenerative farmer who, I mean, he is a real regenerative farmer. He has chickens all over his pastures, and I mean, very pretty much organic type of operation. And he's written books. He's been on Joe Rogan. He's kind of one of the biggest names in the regenerative space. And he put on his blog that Trump had asked Thomas Massie to be the ag secretary, and Massie had asked him to be an advisor. Um, and that kind of blew up. And I guess for people who haven't, I put it up there, and I put Joel Salatin, according to Joel Salatin, Thomas Massie is the next ag secretary. And that I left it up because that is true. And Joel Salatin hasn't came out and said anything. What Thomas Massie has said is that Trump has not um I don't think he said that they haven't talked about it, but he said he has not been appointed anything, pretty much was the main thing about that. And so that happened all within like hours of us recording last time. And since then, I feel like the corporate ag industry has kind of been in a scramble to put up their people. There is now definite campaigns running for ag secretary. And so what me and Chad kind of thought is we need to kind of get our voice out there and
Educate.
yeah. I mean, what did you think? Like, you called me this morning, you said I'm kind of worried about all these names getting pushed. Um, is that what you thought? Like, I mean,
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
goal for this is just to get, just kind of give a farmer, rancher, boots on the ground, like we talked about in the last one, perspective on ag secretary. And that video that Trump did, I was gonna go back and watch it right before we did this, but if people thought he was going to get elected and then kind of get soft on all this stuff as far as going after the deep state and these bureaucrats, that video he put out, like a 3-minute video yesterday, that pretty much nip that in the bud. He said he's going to the main point of that video, I believe, was to let the people who voted for him, whose main goal was to get bureaucrats out of Washington D.C. The goal of that video was telling him that's the plan. He is going to get the deep state bureaucrats who have just grown and grown and grown this federal government out of there. And so I guess we can get into it. So Farm Journal, DTN, Progressive Farmer, and Successful Farmer have all kind of put out their lists. And I was just going to go through the Farm Journal one, but I feel like the number one name, DTN, Progressive Farmer, has done multiple articles in the last day or two about Kip Tom. I guess, go ahead, Shad. Have you looked into him at all?
I have not. I've heard his name for the first time 2 days ago. Know nothing about the guy. Maybe he was an ambassador. Is that right? Was he the ambassador to somewhere?
Okay, a key
I mean,
farmer. I'll put up what. what's on Progressive Farmer. A
Yeah.
key farmer and co-leader of the Farmers and Ranchers for Trump coalition. And then he was also Trump's ambassador to the United Nations agencies in food and agriculture. He's an
Yes.
Indiana farmer. His it says his Tom's name has been mentioned in the past couple of days with others as possible nominee for Secretary of Agriculture. This guy seems like the number, or definitely Progressive Farmers' number one choice. And I think I feel like I'm just talking the whole time, but when it comes to these, I guess to go back to why we're doing this, when it comes to these ag media corporations, they are ran by big ag corporations. They're ran by the same people that are influencing lobbyists are the same people that are influencing Farm Journal, Progressive Farmer, Successful Farmer, all these ag media companies. And they're all kind of coming up with this kind of the same names at the top of their list. So that's the goal for this is to be like, what do actual farmers and ranchers think of this stuff? And so, like, what do you think of Kip Tom?
Well, I want to take it a step back real quick. I want our listeners and the American people to know that our toe is on the edge of the battlefield. This is just the beginning. With Trump getting elected, I think it's very important to understand that the battle has begun because the corporate agriculture is now going to go full bore. Now, I said the other day, the irony was is that they helped us get Trump in, and yet they uplift the ideology that we are all against, and that's globalism. And so I think that that's where we have to start this conversation at, and we have to be very methodical and forthright in what we as independent people want or producers want. And when I saw the Farm Journal article about potential uh, heads of the U.S. secretaries of the USDA, I'm just immediately in a frenzy because number one, we learned from you, Jim, about the climate smart commodity program, the 3.5 or 3.8 billion dollars that they put out, and Farm Journal getting $40 million of that. Right?
Right.
That's a fact. And people do not. When I talked to Mindy Patterson from the Cavalry Group this morning, and she had no idea about the climate smart commodity program and the money they were pushing out to infiltrate and push the climate change narrative. She says, "Where did this come from?" So I sent her your video, and so here we are watching this in real time, and because we as independent producers have these high hopes that our word is finally being heard, that our word, they are going to take us seriously, and now is the time, and it is the time. Now is the time. That's why we can't waste in using our voice. A friend of mine this morning said, "Shad, we have to help. We have to help these globalists use their voice too, and keep them talking because they are going to rat themselves out, right?" And so now we have all of these journals, magazines, whatever, vying to see who's going to be in the position. And a lot of those people we do not want. They are the globalists. And Farm Journal, what I found so unappealing about Farm Journal's article this morning was that they gave every single person that they thought might have a chance to be the Secretary of Agriculture a whole paragraph, but yet they gave Thomas Massie, who is really probably up there as a forward pick. They gave him one sentence, and it said basically, he's a rebel rouser in Congress.
Yeah,
And
I'll
so
read it.
that shows you the positioning of the globalists that they're doing right now. And I mean, we know that American Farm Bureau, American Farm Bureau, Zippy Duvall is the last person we need in there. He's a globalist. We need people like Massie and Hageman. You were talking about a list. I mean, this Conaway, he's supposed to be pretty good. I don't know Kip Tom. I've never heard of him until 2 days ago.
Right.
But we have to get our voice out and say, President Trump, Vice President J.D. Vance, RFK, whoever is in these high leadership positions, we want our voice heard, and we want it heard and taken seriously because now's the time. I mean, if the globalists and the global elite get their way, and they use all of this lobbying money that they get to pay their way into the administration, which is what Trump said was not going to happen. And you reiterated that just now. But we don't want to take a chance.
Yeah.
We have to get our voices heard. And I'm talking to independents out there right now.
Yeah, and that's another. I guess we should go back. Like, we don't know that Thomas Massie. I mean, he said he hasn't been picked.
Right.
Who knows? There's been talk of like maybe they can't put anything out, and Joel Salatin kind of jumped the gun because somebody said he does he kind of beats to his own drum, and maybe he was just like, all right, and did it. But also maybe it was like a misunderstanding where
Maybe.
Massie said, if I'm ag secretary, will you be my advisor? And he took that as we're all in.
Maybe
Who
he
knows?
did,
There
but
hasn't been any clarification besides what
no,
Thomas Massie put out, and so that's what all we can go on. But I think that Thomas Massie, that whole story is what got all this other stuff. And as far as Kip Tom, I don't know anything about him. Um, but the one thing, like, we don't want bureaucrats in there. He was an ambassador to the United Nations, which to me is a bureaucrat. And if you walked in the United Nations and said anything, but you guys need to go to hell, then I
exactly.
don't want anything to do with you, because the United Nations is where this whole everything you talk about,
Yes.
globalism, climate,
Yes.
this climate agenda, the beginning of the cattle are bad for the environment goes straight back to the United Nations. They are the ones that financed the report that said that entire lie, and that whole storyline comes from the United Nations. And I'm not saying, he was part of that, but he worked for him, and like we both said, we don't know.
Well, I'm just saying right now, if he was a part of that, and he was, working on behalf of the independent farmer and rancher in America, he would have, number one, we would have heard about his opposition
Right.
to it. Number two, he would have gotten out of there or got told him to
Yeah.
go straight to hell.
Yeah, yeah, he should have been throwing such a fit that they kicked him out. That's
That's
kind of
right.
the thing.
That's right.
But go back to like Massey, and one of the reasons you called me and I thought about, I like quoting other people because I feel like but Casey Schumacher had put out a tweet yesterday, and I thought about it too, and he said, I don't keep up with Joel Salatin, so I don't know where that release from yesterday would have originated from, but whoever is behind this op has big ag nervous. The grassroots push for Rep Thomas Massie needs to get loud. And so that's kind of where we're at with this. I think I could not have been more excited when when that news broke, but I also couldn't. It was hard for me to believe because it was too good to be true if Thomas Massie becomes the ag secretary, because he like our our views on the cattle industry can pretty much completely line up. And as far as mine and what I put out there, and what he's done and is even said on the House floor at times. And so
Well, rest assured, Jim, that he is on the list. He's on the list, and likely he's on the short list
yeah, and I feel like,
because
go ahead.
he wouldn't have endured an attack or a very low piece of journalism from Farm Journal if it wasn't true that he was on the list. Nobody knows if he's been approached. No, I mean they have to sign so many NDAs, non-disclosure agreements, that they can't talk about it, and so it kind of forces them into his
Yeah.
defense on Twitter. Kind of if he doesn't get it, kind of makes him. It makes everybody look bad, and I know everybody's in a hurry, and we're all excited about the change, and we're all excited about seeing who it is. But we got to, I think, and I'm talking to the mirror right here to myself, is I got to settle down and see what happens day to day. I'm just a stupid rancher out here that has nothing. I don't know why I'm getting so uptight about it, other than the message that our core group has been putting out for the last 10 to 15 years is being heard. And so I'm excited about that. And I know that RFK has acknowledged us independents and RCAF and all of these people that are making a difference on a true grassroots level, right? And can you hear me?
Yeah. I'm
And
letting you
so
roll. I don't want to interrupt.
no, I just think it's very important that we take it day by day, not get too excited, but we have to get our voices out there and have them heard. And I'm working like crazy to get into RFK's camp this morning and see if I could talk to the guy. And I don't know how to do that. I'm just a stupid rancher, right? So I don't know where I'm going with this, other than let me say this: this transition of the 47th president of the United States, the core issue is agriculture. That is at the very core of this transition. And we, as independent American producers, have to be involved in it.
Right. Yeah. And that's where I feel like we got the reason we're doing this, right, is just to hopefully, and we're not saying that we speak for all farmers and ranchers, but just
No,
to put a perspective out there. Because we aren't Lonesome Lands is really a completely self-fund. I mean, not completely. I've gotten subscribers over the past year, but
no,
it's
but
pretty
it's
much we're
independent.
just
It's
take our
independent
time
journalism.
and sit down to do this. We're not paid by John
No.
Deere or, Cargill or ADM or all these companies. And that, yeah, to go back to that, Farm Journal is gotten $40 million over the past couple of years um, from this climate smart commodity directly from Vilsack, from the USDA. And now they've come out with their list of people that they want. And I think the most disturbing one on there, we don't need to go through the whole list. Maybe we should just talk about who we want. Um, but we can talk about one of the names on there, which is Zippy Duvall, who, I mean, there's actually a couple different lobbyists. There's just straight up lobbyists on here for Big Ag, and um, and so I feel like that, like what I said about that, if you put a lobbyist for a Big Ag corporate lobbyist in there for um like that could not be a bigger slap in the face to RFK Jr. or any of the guy, Elon Musk, all those guys that campaigned for Trump under this, kind of grassroots campaign that we weren't going to deal with lobbyists and the big corporations anymore. This would be like
Let
the
me
biggest slap in the face.
Well, let me make a point, Jim. And in 2020, when my video went viral, and the day it went viral happened to be, and I didn't plan this, but it happened to be the day that we were importing our very first shipment of beef from Namibia onto the U.S. shores. That was just a God thing that all come together that day. The very next day, and I got a call from somebody very high, and they talked to me about it, and they said, I'm fully in support. Why is this happening? Blah, blah, blah. The very next day, the president of the United States, along with the American Farm Bureau, Zippy Duvall, right beside him, and the NCBA on the other side of him, rolled out the food corona food virus program, or coronavirus food program. That's what it was. And they had it on live TV, if you'll remember it. And President Trump was in the middle. Zippy Duvall was on his left, and NCBA was on his right. And in that live feed, President Trump said, "Why are we importing beef from Namibia anyway?" And those two men representing American Farm Bureau and the NCBA eyes got about that big. Their jaw dropped, and we never heard another thing from the president about Namibian beef hitting our shores. Never
Right.
did. They took care
Yeah.
of that. That's the power of the purse that we have to avoid this time. And I think Trump understands that we have to avoid that. So I would say all of this posturing from the agriculture media is just that. It's posturing. There's probably money flowing out there. Man, I don't know. It's wild and it's crazy. But we have to have independents have to have our voices heard. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, and just to go back, if you're not familiar with Zippy Duvall, he's been is it president? Yeah, American Farm Bureau president. And for the record, American Farm Bureau is people get mad anytime you talk bad about them, but because they are filled with wonderful people at the county and even at the state level.
Absolutely.
Where those voices get completely muffled is when you go to the national. And he is the
Absolutely.
president of the national. And American Farm Bureau has been all in on, like what you said, this globalist agenda, the climate agenda, all of that stuff. And, to go back over the past 5 years, we have lost, there are like 450,000 less small farms and ranches than there used to be. And Farm Bureau says that that's who they represent. You've lost close to 500,000 in 5 years. And like I said on a couple episodes ago, that is an abject failure of Farm Bureau. And we
100%.
see all of these things happen. And for cattle people, if you're a grain guy, you might not know, but for cattle people, we've had legislation in there that simply said we're going to play by the rules. This isn't new rules or because all this stuff happened over during COVID and actually before, where they were manipulating the market and have done all this shady stuff that's blatantly obvious. And so we've tried to get legislation passed, and Farm Bureau has been against it every step of the way. They've been lobbying all the politicians, but they've also been lobbying their members. They bring out this economist from Colorado State who is so connected with JBS. Colorado State is pretty much JBS University. What's that
That's
guy's name?
correct.
Kuntz,
That's
something like
correct.
that.
Yep,
Is that the guy's name?
I think
Yeah, so
so.
they bring him out and to tell about, he's an economist and he talks about how any sort of regulation on beef packers to make them actually play by the rules is going to destroy the cattle industry and hurt cattle ranchers. And that's how Farm Bureau kind of works, as far as the national level.
Well, and let me
And
add something to that, Jim, because you're talking about JBS and Colorado State University and how it's all interwoven into the AFB. JBS in 2019 paid uh, Colorado State University $12 million and helped them build the Global Food Initiative Center at Colorado State University. Now
yeah,
that is a foreign meat company, the largest in the world, bribing a United States university with global money to push an agenda. Now
yeah.
this is how this is working in there.
And so Farm Bureau, for there's all these things we've always talked about that the whole agriculture system and how it's been corrupted by it's like every system and every industry out there has been corrupted by these corporations and lobbyists. And Farm Bureau, they say, it's definitely the biggest lobbyist in agriculture and most powerful kind of voice in DC in agriculture. But some people say in all of DC, that Farm Bureau is the most powerful lobby, and and to put him in there, if he becomes Secretary of Agriculture or any voice at all. And Trump loved him
Anymore.
last time. I think Trump what Trump loves is his first name. He loves saying Zippy. But he, but to put him in there would really be kind of a slap in the face to the entire campaign he ran on again of going against this bureaucrats and I feel like the same thing. Like we don't really need to go through the list, but if you've ever, who I want to see is somebody who hasn't been on an ag committee,
Yep.
who doesn't because if you've been on the ag committee, you have close relationships with all these lobbyists. You've been visited multiple times, and who knows what they've done for you. And I want to see someone who has strong connections to agriculture. Thomas Massie raises his own cattle, has his own farm, and he's also what I was telling Shad last time. I'm gonna put a link. I'm gonna try to put a link to the documentary because he's an amazing person. Who lives off the grid and built his own house, timber frame house, and he powers it by this Tesla car motor. And Shad was talking about how there's going to be such a learning curve. The guy is a
Gee.
genius. I mean, he has 2 degrees from MIT, which is the most and engineering. I think they're both kind of math and engineering. And so if anybody can figure things out and understand things quickly and probably already does, it's that guy. Um, and the other name I feel like no one has talked about except for probably us is Harriet Hageman. And you know her better than anybody, but what is her background? Like,
She's a lawyer by trade, but she is from a ranching family at Pine Bluffs, Wyoming. I think it's Pine Bluffs. And her brother, they are actively in the ranching business. Her brother runs a family ranch, and she has, her fight in property rights speaks for itself in Americanism over the last 20 years or 30 years really. And she, the really sweet thing I like about her is number one, she's a bulldog. I mean, she's been raised to be tough. She's got a backbone, and she went to college to a junior college on a livestock judging scholarship. I mean, she is one of us,
right.
and she is on my list. I would like to see her as the Secretary of Interior or really the Secretary of Agriculture. Either would be fine by me. Yeah, I'm not. It kind of sounds like we're pushing Massie and pushing away from Zippy Duvall, which fine by me. I don't care if we push away from Zippy Duvall. I do not want any globalists in there. I'm tired of him.
Or
And
anybody that has anything to do with the, I mean, he has the deepest connections with the corporations, the
absolutely.
deepest of anybody.
Well, the thing is they're so deception. They're so deceiving, right? Because if you read that, what's in the Farm Journal today, it says, oh, they run all the 250,000 broilers. They're in the cow calf. He's in the cow calf business, and he runs a dairy. He doesn't do any of that. He's
Well,
not
yeah,
there.
you can't be the president of Farm
You
Bureau and be a
exactly,
farmer. That's the kind
exactly.
of thing.
There are all of these higher ups, like what was it? Maybe GT Thompson. He says, "Yeah, I'm from a dairy." He hasn't been a part of a dairy in 2 generations.
Yeah,
He's
I mean
never
that's
been
the
a part
thing.
of
Like,
a dairy.
well, Chuck Grassley, I'm not putting his name out there. He's well past his prime, but I mean he does show videos of himself combining his fields and things like that. I mean he is on the farm at times.
Yeah,
And
but to
and that's
say
a
all of these things, Jim, is like my eighth great grandfather is Daniel Boone. Well, then
right.
I should say I was part of settling the
Yeah,
West. You
you're an
know,
explorer.
yeah, I'm an explorer. So I mean these things that aren't that are so deceptive in nature, they do not
Right.
have skin in the game or identify with true producers, and that's just the way it is.
Yeah. And that's the thing about Harriet. She doesn't call herself a rancher.
Nope.
I mean, she says that she comes from a ranch. She grew up on a
Yep.
ranch. And the thing about her, I wasn't that familiar until she gave that talk at the Freedom Rally, and that was so impressive, I felt like, because she had such a knowledgeable scope on that subject. Like she knew it better than anyone there.
Yes. Yeah.
And she was able to, she is an incredible speaker too. Like she was
Oh,
able to really lay it out there and get her message across, which is not an easy thing either. And it's kind of what we need, somebody that can not only know the issues but get their points across.
yeah.
And so um I don't know,
I
I
really
guess
think
go ahead.
I really think the point of um, this video today, this Lonesome Report extra, is to have our thoughts go out there, and I think it's to really try to energize the grassroots base, the real grassroots base, to make their voice heard on a
Yeah.
national level. That means using social media, whatever we could do to try and influence President Trump, RFK, JD Vance, all of these people that have a hand in what's going to happen to the future of agriculture, and to really deny the globalists, because that's exactly what you said, Jim, is very important to understand. These people, these trade organizations are representing us and have been representing us for half a century now, and we have less producers, we eat less beef per capita today than we have in history. The cattle number, we can't, there's entry barriers into the industry, barriers into the industry, and I think that needs to be hollered out from the loudest level. I mean, yes, the operations are still there, but they're controlled by the corporate oligarchs. And I think we, as independent producers, have to yell right now, louder than any time, and get the attention of President Trump, Vice President JD Vance, and whoever else will hear us.
Yeah, but it's also to let people know, I think, coming from the media side, is that these names you're hearing that are being put out as like there's talk of this person, there's talk of that person. Well, that's because that those people are campaigning. Like this Kip
Yes.
Tom getting talked about over and over is not because he's, out in his fields, working or out hauling grain. It's because he's making phone calls and getting his name heard. And to go back to the Farm Journal thing, there every single person on this list has a at least a paragraph, some more, talking about their backgrounds. And like I said, Representative Thomas Massie probably has the most interesting and you know well documented background, I would say too. And they wrote one sentence: he is a rebel House conservative that most consider a long shot
Yep.
choice. Um, and so I think that tells you a lot. This is a magazine that has been funded 40, written a check $40 million for their stance on the climate and their push on this climate crap. And I think the only reason his name got on there is because that Joel Salatin deal and because he's the number one kind of rumor that went out there. And the other thing about him, I put it out when I saw that. I put it out on social media, and it's probably one of the most liked things I've ever put out. I didn't get one single negative comment on anything I put out. I've seen one negative comment, and it came from, I think he's a fertilizer salesman. It was on Twitter. Had put out that the American row crop farmer cannot have Thomas Massie in there, and he got quite a bit of pushback on that. Because to me, I think what farmers and ranchers really want, their number one priority is a strong American agriculture, and it might not be, you know, because it's not the same priority as the corporations. And these names you're
That is,
hearing through these magazines are the names that the corporations want to push.
that's right. That's exactly right. And to me, I mean, if you just look at that article and you see that Thomas Massey has absolutely one sentence
Yeah,
in
and
there,
part of
that
it
tells
is
me
he's a
he
long
is
shot
probably
choice.
very,
Like he don't have a chance.
yeah, exactly. So he's probably at the very top, number one. And I was on Fox News with him a while back, and he was staunchly against the EID RFID, and we both agreed that it was a property rights issue and that it would be a freedom taker to the American producer. And so he is probably not very popular amongst the global cartel on that issue. So
Right.
yeah,
And so I
they're
would
positioning
say,
themselves.
yeah, sorry. I interrupted.
No, no, you're good.
Yeah, I would say the number one criteria should be someone who has stood up to big ag. And those are the
Yes.
two people we mentioned. And you could say Sid Miller. I think you could throw his name in there too.
It was on
And
that
he is
list
being
on
talked
Farm
about
Journal.
a lot.
Right, right.
But again, he is someone who is really connected more to. I don't know. I mean, I guess I don't really know that much about him. But all right, we good? Thanks
I
for
feel like
watching.
we
If
are.
you want to support, like, I felt like Shad did called me, and I'm in the middle of stuff, and that's the other thing. Like, we're not media people. Like, I have another job that I'm trying to get things done with, and I'm like, well, if I'm really going to do this, this is the kind of stuff we need to do. We have a message we want to get out there. We need to get it out there. And so if you want to make that easier for us and support what we're doing in kind of a grassroots voice, go to lonesomelands.com, click on the subscribe button. There's a number of different ways you can help us out. And that's it. Share the video, I guess. If you want
Yeah,
people to
share the
hear
video.
a rancher and a farmer and people connected to agriculture's voice and not the people who are bought and paid for by big ag, share this video and get the names that you want out there. If you got a different
Yep,
name, put a different name out there.
absolutely.
But hopefully there's someone who has stood up for the independent farmers and ranchers.
And I just want to make one last appeal right now. This is not about right or left, Democrat versus Republican. My friend Eric Groper always says this is about right and wrong, and that's really what we're standing for, is what's right and what's wrong under the Constitution of the United States, and in our quest for maintaining a free country.
God bless America.
God bless America.